Questions and answers on Aramaic, brought to you by JesusSpokeAramaic.com. So today we're going to look at the Aramaic resources available from within eSword. So eSword, first of all, is a very good overall package for doing Bible study. It's been around for years and years, since the early 2000s. There are literally probably around 30 million downloads of it now, and it's been going around for at least 10 to 15 years. It provides a lot of good free resources, lots and lots of different Bible versions, which you can see on the right hand side in that screenshot, lots of commentaries and texts of the Bible, and anything that's free is generally a very good place to start. But in particular, we're interested in what Aramaic resources are available in eSword. So up until now, the Aramaic resources in eSword have been rather limited. So there is, for example, the Old Testament text, and that includes the passages in Biblical Aramaic. But really, again, that's kind of limited because it really just provides the standard non-vocalized text. You can look up Strong's words and so on within the Aramaic text. But apart from that, it's pretty limited. It's what all Bible study packages provide. All Bible study packages provide the Old Testament text, and therefore, by definition, the Biblical Aramaic text. One of the optional modules available within eSword is Murdoch's translation, which is good. That's a good starting point, a translation of the Aramaic Peshitta New Testament, one that stood the test of time, it's reliable, and so on. So optionally, you can download the Murdoch translation of the Aramaic New Testament into eSword if you want to. However, one of the really important additions to eSword that's now available is what's been provided by the AramaicNT.com. So they now provide eSword modules of the Aramaic Bible modules, which are produced by AramaicNT.com. This is Reverend David Boucher, who has some excellent works, and his editor Tim, who also provides these. So I just want to take a look at this and just see some information here. First of all, in red on that screen, an Aramaic New Testament manuscript dated 78 AD by the original scribe who copied it, and there's a whole article there about an Aramaic New Testament manuscript dated to 78 AD. Really interesting article, but that just illustrates just how important the Aramaic New Testament is. That would make it the oldest dated manuscript in the world. Nothing would predate that. But secondly, more importantly, at the top in green, we have the eSword modules. So just like to, if you imagine clicking on that link and just seeing what's available. So there, for $15, you can get the whole set that we'll look at shortly in eSword. It allows eSword and MySword programs to have the Aramaic English interlinear and also other texts, which we'll see shortly. What that module provides is, first of all, a numbered Aramaic dictionary. So it's a little bit like Strong's Numbered. It's the equivalent to that, where each lexical entry gets its own entry, and you can look at it and provide further information about it. It also provides the Aramaic English Interlinear New Testament, which is obviously interlinear, Aramaic and English together, and an interlinear really can help you fundamentally to understand the Aramaic text when you compare it to the equivalent word in English and then start to understand how the words are put together, learn vocabulary. Interlinears are a good way to really get started with a text. Then there's the original Aramaic New Testament in plain English, which is what AramaicNT.com provides. There's also Peshitta companion notes, and there's also the vocalized Peshitta New Testament text with Eastern Aramaic pronunciation to help you at least have an understanding of what the word would sound like in the original. That's helpful if, for example, you can't read Aramaic, or if you also want to just understand how the Aramaic is pronounced in terms of vowels and so on. And so we're going to have a look now, just switch to video, and we'll get a look at what that actually looks like within eSword. So here we have eSword, and this is running on the Mac. So the PC version may appear slightly different, but in general the Mac version has colour and various other facilities. Fonts may appear maybe slightly differently in different versions, but this is running specifically on the Mac version. So here we have the Old Testament text. We've selected Daniel chapter 2 verse 4 and also the Hebrew Old Testament here, and we have the unvocalized Hebrew and Aramaic text of the Hebrew Old Testament. So this verse, Daniel chapter 2, verse 4, starts off in Hebrew, then it switches partway through the verse to Aramaic. So it's not all that helpful on its own, partly because there aren't any vocalization. So if we switch to the Hebrew Old Testament plus text, it's then more helpful. We have the Hebrew Strong's numbers and so on, and at least we can start to look up what those verses are and what the words mean and so on. But let's switch now to the other text which we talked about. Now if we go to Murdoch translation, and then we'll select John's Gospel, for example. So Murdoch's translation is of the Aramaic New Testament. It's a perfectly good starting point as a translation goes. We can read it, we can do the usual things with all the things that eSword provides and so on. So at least the Aramaic translation of the Aramaic New Testament is there. But what I specifically want to look at is what these new texts, if you buy the Aramaic module from AramaicNT.com, what does that provide? So first of all, we have the actual text that Reverend Boucher has put together, the translation, which is another alternative of that Murdoch translation. And if you look at that, it again provides the normal things that any text would provide, the New Testament translation itself. We can also see that in red here, there are certain comments on the text, and that's where a translation alone becomes even more useful when you start to be able to see the notes that the translator puts together. Those are generally things that a translation alone can't capture, so I usually find that the footnotes in any translation often are the most interesting things. Otherwise it's just another translation. So if we set the commentary here to the OANT notes, which I've done here, we can then click on those to find what the comments are. And this is where it becomes extremely useful. Once you have comments on the text, things which are difficult to translate or which are important, that becomes extremely useful at that point. And here, any of the verses which I've read means that that's something that would be useful to look up. And again, we can go through these comments, read the translation, and when we come to something which is in red, highlighted, we can look up the text there. So that's extremely useful. So what other texts do we have here if you buy that package? First of all, we have the Aramaic English interlinear, and that's important. Here we have the Hebrew Ashuri characters, which we talk about on the JesusSpokeAramaic.com website. So each verse, for example, then has the Aramaic word in the Ashuri letters. It then has a gloss in English, so cad is when. It then has effectively something like a Strong's numbers. So what we can then do is look that up. So we can define that, we can do a search on it, but now we find that cad used in the New Testament, generally it's when, but you can also translate it a few other things depending on how it appears in the context of a whole sentence. It's a root word, other lexicon information. We can start to really get to grips with each and every word. Here, extremely helpfully, we've got the corresponding Greek and Hebrew words, and that often means that we can start to see connections between the Greek text, the Hebrew text, and the Aramaic text. So this allows you to really build up systematically a knowledge of Aramaic in the New Testament. We can also look up that word in Dukrana by simply clicking there, look up the word in the Comprehensive Aramaic Lexicon, and also Payne Smith's. So these are other online resources which allows us to build up a more comprehensive picture of this particular word. And again, that is extremely helpful. So a lot of work has gone into this to take the glosses of the word and link them to other online resources which are free in order to build up a more comprehensive picture of the text. So again, we can look up define other words and so on, really understand the different nuances of the word. He took up, he supported, was supported, etc. To take up, to bear something, to lift it, to carry it. And so we start to build up a picture of that word. And again, we can see other corresponding entries. We can start to get a different picture of those words by looking up the other online resources that this is linked to. So it's an extremely comprehensive package you get. So this is the Hebrew Ashuri letters, a gloss, then it provides the equivalent of a Strong's number in order to help you to understand what the word would be in the Aramaic. Remember, this isn't Hebrew or Greek Strong's numbers. This is specifically a number relating to the Aramaic New Testament text, which is excellent. It allows you to really understand the text. So this is an interlinear, so you'd probably want to compare this with the earlier text we saw, where the words were rearranged into something that would make more sense in English. But interlinears are actually a really good way to get started with the text in order to understand how the words fit together. Word order will inevitably be different in Aramaic, but it's a great way to start. And again, you can click on a verse to get the OANT notes here. So that's the Aramaic English interlinear. We can also look at the equivalent in Estrangela. This actually, in the Mac version, this appears to be the Swadaya forms, which we also have letters, but it may appear differently on the Mac. And again, it's the same basic format, but we see the shapes of the letters as either Estrangela or Swadaya, depending on which font you're working with. So again, it's extremely useful because we can now take, for instance, a printed version and start to piece it together, start to understand the text, start to understand the word order in Aramaic, start to do searches in these words. Where else does that word appear? An enormous amount of work has gone into this, but it's a fantastic starting point, extremely low cost. eSword itself is free, and this module only costs $15, so it's an extremely highly recommended way to get started with the real Aramaic text. Here we also have the vocalized version of this, which is an extra gloss to at least allow you to start to see how the word would be pronounced. And that's useful because although there aren't vowels in this text, at least you can see what the vowels would be. It's never exactly the same sounds as English exactly, but at least it lets you see what the pronunciation would actually be. So again, this is extremely helpful. We can also switch to that vocalized text, which is the Ashuri text vocalized. So there's a sort of gloss in English transliteration of the Aramaic letters in order to let you see how roughly it would be pronounced in English. This is an extremely helpful module that really does help you to systematically get inside the Aramaic New Testament text to understand it better. And once you combine all those things together, you can really start to see how the text is made up. And obviously this is for the whole of the New Testament, so all the different books of the New Testament are there. So this is a really highly recommended way to get into the Aramaic text. So that is just a glimpse really into some of the Aramaic modules, resources which are available in eSword. And we'll certainly look at other Bible packages such as BibleWorks and Accordance over time. But eSword at least is a very good way to get started understanding the New Testament, and this AramaicNT.com package is an extremely low-cost way to get started, and one that is highly recommended to everyone. If you have eSword and you're interested in Aramaic, you really have to get this package, in my opinion. It's very good. This question and answer session was brought to you by JesusSpokeAramaic.com. To submit your question for consideration in a future session, fill out the form at JesusSpokeAramaic.com/contact. Be sure to visit JesusSpokeAramaic.com for step-by-step video lessons on the history and background of Aramaic, to learn the Aramaic alphabet in the Ashuri, Estrangela and Serta scripts, for biblical Aramaic, the Aramaic Peshitta New Testament, the Aramaic Old Testament and the Aramaic Targums. We offer a growing range of Aramaic DVDs, workbooks, study guides and meditational CDs on well-known passages of the Bible, books about Aramaic, a range of specialist Hebrew and Aramaic Bibles, and generally everything you need to study Aramaic in the context of the Holy Scriptures. JesusSpokeAramaic.com is a one-stop shop when it comes to learning Aramaic. Subscribe to get full access to the complete range of several hundred step-by-step video lessons, exclusive bonus material, and other resources that are available only to subscribers of JesusSpokeAramaic.com.